Right. Paul, we ready? Thank you. Welcome to the October 21st facility meeting. I'd like to take roll. Dr. Grande. Here. Mr. Henry. Mr. Miller. Here. Mrs. Holbert. Here. I'd like to move forward with approval of the September 16th facility meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. We always start our meeting with our mission and vision statement. Tonight's agenda, we're going to be quickly discussing RFP update on construction management, the RFP update for architectural services, two preventive maintenance objectives that we're looking at projects, and the acquisition of Ford Transit box van that we acquired this month. As you're aware, going through the timeline, right now CHA has been supporting us in the architectural selection process. They've sat in on both, on all four interviews and helped with the selection of narrowing down the architectural firms to two. The timeline, as it stands right now, will most likely be modified, but that's subject to change at the discretion of the district. The RFP for architectural design and engineering services update. Yeah, last. RFP responses were due October 1st. WSSD shortlisted the respondents to 4 firms. Candidate presentations and interviews were the 15th and the 16th of this month. The district narrowed down to 2 firms, and we're in the process of planning site visits to projects that the architects have that are similar to our project that we're going to be doing at the high school. Selected finalists will present at future facilities and finance meeting to be determined. And then the architectural engineering firm will be selected at a future board meeting. Preventive maintenance update. At the last meeting, we spoke about CN3 and their preventive maintenance work that they've done over the summer. And they came up with a list of priority 1 issues. And the second one I will discuss will be a project that myself and Divine Brothers generated a preventive maintenance program and schedule for our chillers and cooling towers. The priority 1 interview, stepping back to CN3, is based on MPE, the middle school, SRS, and WES. We left the high school out due to the renovation project, and we just focused on the 4 other schools. There were 33 major issues at the schools, and CN3 came up with a number of $467,219. I went back to CN3 this week and said I want an itemized list broken down into each individual item. They do have a targeted explanation, but it doesn't break it down to cost. I want to be able to go in, look at those costs, and I guess throw it against the wall and get some other prices from other vendors, just to make sure that it's in proper number. I just don't want a lump sum number coming to for approval to the board and saying, I feel comfortable with this. I don't until I see the individual breakdown. And it's broken down into a lot of different leaks, controller replacements, some unit replacements throughout the middle school NPE West, and SRS. So each individual issue number on the left relates back to a report that we have, that we couldn't see exactly what it is. However, I want to create another column on the right, which will give an individual price for each one. And I'm waiting to hear back from CN3 on it.
They have multiple that say cooling delta. I think that's just how much the delta in the temperature, right?
Yeah, or cooling delta is.
In and out.
It's the change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the change.
it's what it should be doing.
Okay.
It can relate to a dirty coil. It can relate to a lot of things, low refrigerant. But if you look back at the issue, it would give a little bit better of a description of what it is. But I really want to be able to see a cost per issue. And then also balance that number then against the budget. And see what's the most cost effective to do and what money we have to do. And, you know, work with the one on that. Now to dig into the preventive maintenance contract for the district's 3 chillers and cooling towers. What I was able to do was negotiate a flat contract for the next 3 years of $43,110, with 0 increases over the 3 years. And it breaks down into each individual timeframe, spring and fall, exactly what they'll be doing for each unit and what they're contracted to do, which will ensure that we'll get better life out of the cooler, out of the cooling towers and better performance out of the chillers. The chiller at SRS is brand new, it's only a couple of years old. The chillers at the high school are approximately 20 years old, 25 years old. One probably only has maybe 8 years worth of operation on it. It was never ever used. We worked that chiller this spring and into the summer, and now we're switching back and forth between the 2 chillers. And it gets into mid-season operating inspections, what they do, season startups. I won't run through the whole list. You're more than welcome to, but. And then finally, we were able to purchase this 2024, was a leftover box truck, which had a list price of $84,586, and was able to negotiate a $26,587 savings because it was a leftover. It was sitting on the lot. This same vendor, Bergey's, is where we got a truck last year, and I think we saved in the neighborhood of yeah, a good number last year from it. So hopefully, we can have a continued arrangement with them going down the road as we need vehicles. Look at the leftovers. They had 0 miles on it. And this will be used by our electrician, as well as the inside of the box could also be used for transporting furniture, drywall, plywood. It has a 10-foot box on it. So we are able to move some stuff in inclement weather.
And I did just want to mention, this year and last year, for the first time that the district actually allotted money in operations to replace vehicles. A lot of our operation vehicles are very, very old, falling apart. So that was something that Bob and I talked about, Mr. Logan, sorry, of adding that to their budget. So again, this is budgeted money, and like I said, both this year and last year. Last year, they saved about $73,000 on the deal that Bob negotiated. So again, we're using budgeted money to do this, but in comparison to, instead of the amount of money the district was spending on repairs for some of the older vehicles, it's definitely a good offset savings there.
So we probably have another 1 or 2 vehicles in the next 3 years to purchase to get our fleet back up to where it should be. And as for agenda topics moving forward, you know, we'll be discussing the high school renovation, the capital plan, more preventive maintenance, budgeting going into 25-26, preventative maintenance objectives for the spring going into the summer, some project updates, and we'll give a final update next month on the ADA safety projects we're completing down at the concession stand. Any questions for the committee?
Yeah, just real quick, so the 467, 219, that we're gonna get more detail on, how does that compare to the money that's budgeted?
So that is coming out of the $1.2 million of preventative maintenance, so we don't have to find $467,000. But again, what Bob and I did discuss, there might have to be some changes as it relates to everything that he had planned to do this year. Again, with the fact that the district does have that money, he just may have to shift some things that were intended for this year to next year. But again, that's why he asked for that itemized list, because there are some things in that $467,000 that we may be able to hold off on until next year. So by getting that itemized information, we can focus on the money that we do have available to cover that. But again, you don't have to find money to do that. He has a preventative maintenance budget that the district added last year and we can go forward. So again, the benefit of that preventative money is to not allow the district to get in the situation we are with all of the deferred maintenance, the millions of dollars of deferred maintenance that we have. We have the opportunity to address some of these things.
We can look at shifting some of the projects, whether it might be a seal coating job or something, we could get another year out of that lot. So we'll save 60,000, slide that to the right, and then maybe able to pull a little bit of stuff in for repairs that are needed.
The maintenance agreement, 43,000 a year. I assume the idea here is to stave off the cost of replacing chillers and cooling towers.
Correct.
And what's the magnitude of cost for a chiller or a cooling tower?
We did have the cooling tower replaced at the high school. I'll have to get back to you on that, because that was a year before I came.
Mhm.
But a chiller is probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 55,000 for a new chiller. So, so a pair would be 110 for the high school.
And then lastly, the 2 or 3 more vehicles left to bring the fleet up to snuff. Are we talking about budgeted money again, or are we looking for that money?
So, no.
This is a rolling budget.
Right, this is, that $75,000 is currently in the operations budget. So again, it's not something new that the district would have.
Thank you.
Just on the, 467. So 2 questions. So one, I appreciate you asking for a lot more detail on a line by line breakdown. Just on a high level, like I realize we have many mechanical systems in the district, lots of these issues get identified. Like, what is our ability when they're coming forward and identifying, a long list of problems to verify what they're telling us? And is it ever within the realm of like feasibility and cost effectiveness to have someone else come in and evaluate our systems? I realize that's could be a big undertaking for another entity to come in and do that.
Well,
It's
we
not
did,
like having them come look at one unit and say, there's something wrong with it, how much does it cost to fix it?
we did that with our chillers and having Divine Brothers come in. We were using another company who needed that, wasn't CM3. We were very happy with the work they were doing because the chiller kept resetting. So all of a sudden I get the phone call from the high school, it's warm in the main office. I'd look at the RTU on the system, all of a sudden I'd see the temperature rise, go back to the mechanical room, look at the chiller was off. Go over, reset it, and we had the other company in multiple times. Brought in Divine Brothers, within a day, they had diagnosed what it was. So it's more of their forte, what they do. So it's bringing the right vendor in to do the work.
And I don't know if Bob was just setting that up for the procurement presentation we're going to do today. But that's exactly what this process is. I think all 3 of us have had conversations with, there are several vendors that the district has done business with for a very long time. And those companies just were given business. And as in the few things we've gone through this process of just, hey, let's do some due diligence. We've found either, better services, better pricing. So again, that's what this procurement process really is, just doing the due diligence and not just giving business. Certain people, the district should make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. And at the end of the day, the rate of return of what the district is spending, our needs are being met. So that's really what this entire process is showing, making sure we can do anything. I think it's right.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess what's coming to my head is there's like two issues there. There's the what, right? And sort of triaging it into, is it broken, not broken, urgent, not urgent? And I know we've gone through that process with CM3. But when we get into these like really big ticket items, what would it cost us to bring someone else in to review the same systems and render another opinion? And then secondly, once we decide what we want to actually do in terms of repairs, then the price of doing those repairs. So they're really,
Well,
you know, is my car actually have a problem or not? And how much does it cost to fix my car? Okay,
Once I get it itemized, if it's above the threshold, I'm gonna have to go out, especially if I'm gonna individually pick, maybe not 33,
sure.
maybe 20 of them, and I'll bring in 2 other vendors. So now I have the issue log of exactly what it is. They can go in, do the due diligence, check on it, and then give me a price for that work.
So would we ever, like, again, I know CM3 did this like comprehensive review, I guess my question is like, is it feasible or would we ever want someone else to come in to do the same kind of assessment of all of these systems before selecting what we actually ought to?
Bob and I actually just had that conversation
Yeah.
today. Some of this is a long-term thing, like especially when it comes to things that this office manages, as far as like there are
Well,
internal remote controls type things, and like there are a lot of things behind the wall that it's not just as cut as dry as saying, hey, we want a different company to provide this service. So Bob and I actually had that conversation today about identifying what are long-term things when we're going through this capital plan. When you're going into, like how he just mentioned about the children, we're going into the high school, that would be the time to focus and do the things at that building. When you're going into SRS, that would be the time to identify and do things there, because it may not be cost effective for us to do a switch or have someone else analyze it right now.
Sure.
So again, Bob, his office is actually already actively working on identifying the appropriate time and the most cost effective time that would be for the district to address all of this.
because when we did have the Giza project 3 years ago, Wallingford was completely 100% Honeywell, everything. When the Giza project was done, the head end, the controller, is now CM3. So now all the Honeywell parts are integrated into the head end. So when we look at the high school and we say, all right, well, we're gonna look at new controls. That's the time when we say, well, maybe let's look at vendor A, B, C. And say, all right, maybe it might be a Siemens product, or maybe it's a Johnson Controls, Medisys, or FX project. Start to go in, and then the next project down the road is gonna be SRS. So now you have CM3, you might have vendor A. Then you look at when you're bidding, okay, now you have 2 vendors to bid against each other. You have a more competitive price than just having one. So,
If I ask you a related question, maybe in a slightly different way. So we have this list from CM3, we have this triage list here. What is our internal capacity to judge the accuracy of this list?
well,
Like, or just rather, be able to look at this list, go look at the equipment and judge against the meat.
well, we have one HVAC tech in, and when we prioritize, 1, 2, 3, all the 3s are gonna be repaired by our own internal tech. We didn't want to spend that money, we have someone on board to do that. When I look at what the pricing is gonna be, then we'll go in and really start to review the issue on. You know, if it's a coil leak, it's gonna be going in and diagnosing where in that coil that leak is. Having to pull it out and say, well, if I repair the one, it's a 20-year-old coil. Am I gonna repair leak 3, 4, 5, 6 in a few more months? Taking a look, analyzing it, seeing it with my own eyes and saying, in my HVAC guy, no, we gotta retrofit and put a whole new coil in.
I could just briefly, I think between Bob and our HVAC, person, staff member, we do have, I feel confident that we can do that sort of internal check. There hasn't, in the time that I've been here, which has been short, but we've had a lot of work seem to me, even in the time that I've been here. the Bob's analysis and CM3's report has been a high quality books. There hasn't been sort of a concern of investing in paid repairs that haven't panned out. So I don't have an immediate concern about this list, particularly because of your expertise, Bob. And I know that we're moving towards the, like, you know, Bob and Dewan, or Mr. Maloney again. Ms. Mosler is saying that we're moving towards a more, you know, more comprehensive view on this. And I think that the additional pricing that Mr. Maloney will do when we have the itemized list from CM3 will actually give us a chance. That'll be a way of double checking, and it won't be going back to the drawing board like you're asking for. And it's a good question. I think that there's a balance of, we need to get these things done. We have a good partner. We have a very strong director of our buildings and grounds. And so there is a way that we'll do some checking along the way. And then as we continue to from the capital plan, how to deeper view the schools. This procurement.
You know, we start looking at apples to apples, the new split system, Mitsubishi unit, it needs to get repaired. That's an easy phone call to a couple of vendors. Give me a ballpark cost of what it is. Material cost for that. And you can compare and say, is it in the game, or no, I have to start looking somewhere else, you know? The phrase is always, there are pigs and sows. If you know the terminology, but leave it there.
I appreciate you entertaining my question. Anything else from that?
If you would mind, I just want to go back to the high school project and really just shine a little bit more light on that process, which has been extremely exciting, just exciting and actually gratifying so far. As Mr. Maloney said, we had 9 very strong proposals that were submitted for the architectural services, the architectural and engineering services that we did a review for top quality firms, and we are in the process of selecting our site visits. We just started to set up today, and we will have them either right around election day. So we'll have all the information that we need, plus the reference check that I will personally be doing between now and very early November, will put us in a place where we probably know who we want as the architect in November. The question will be, when are we ready to bring that to the solution policy and to the board for what are we bringing? And I think that it is likely that, you know, as we did with the we are doing the construction management firm, we're likely to take this in stages and not, you know, I know that there's probably some concern about how are we going to fund it. What we know is the cost of our capital improvement plan. We know that the plan would cost $164 million, as was described in last year's terminal and last year's dollars, last fiscal year. The question is, what can we afford? And how are we going to be very responsible and very thoughtful about how we finance this plan? And so it is likely that we will bring information to the board in phases about this work instead of just sort of jumping with, you know, without noticing what we're getting ourselves into and how we will continue to work to finance this project. And so I just wanted to give you as board members and our public just an update that we are doing our diligence, we are doing this ahead, and when we come in November, it will be with, I think, a plan for how we are taking just that next step, but probably not the entire contract for what size of project we're taking on, because we need some diligence in order to be ready for deciding exactly what is that depth that really taking on for this project. So again, just very excited to see it all come together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know that process needs to be iterative, so we can figure out what we can afford, and based on that, start to really prioritize what gets done. So, and what fixes. So appreciate that.
Precisely the thing that we set up.
Yeah.
And if I can add that, it's been interesting to talk to some of the architects about solutions they might have that are not in the original proposal.
Yeah.
So for example, the proposal that we worked on to come up with that number of $64 million calls for additional remodulars during the period of construction. And that would cost $3 million just to have, you know, a couple of years worth of modulars. And it was exciting to see the architects who came before us, the proposals for how we could keep the existing modulars during construction, or perhaps find other places for students to be located, but not have to spend that $3 million. So what we saw from the original, what originally got us to this point, is all subject to reconsideration, just making sure we're being very wise and very thoughtful, getting the best partners on board with us super early. I'll have to think about what we specifically need and what we specifically want.
Thank you for that update. Just before we move on, yeah,
Dr. Johnson, you answered one of my questions about the timeline for the architectural RFP. So Bob, you cite a lot of timelines here, and that's fine, but what I'm really interested in knowing is if any of them have slipped. With good reason, it's okay if they do, there might be, but I can't tell from these dates, and are these what we originally projected? I don't know. You don't have to answer that right now, but somehow if you could incorporate into any of your timeline
For the
updates.
architect or for the,
Well, you cite the RFP timeline, the architectural RFP timeline, design and construction, all those timelines, and, this is a narrative, but I've also been used to seeing, bar graphs that go out and it sort of shows the month by month progress and how original and how it's taken out. And that's fine, but it's just useful information to know. Okay, I don't know if you can do all that, so that's just one comment. 30, maybe it went right past me, but it said 32 issues have been selected as priority one, and they've itemized those. But yet you use as an example something at the high school, and I don't see the high school down here as anything. You talked about it being too hot or too cold, and you went up to the rooftop unit, RTU. And I'm just showing off that I remember what we told you the last time.
I was discussing the PM for the chillers and tower, anything dealing with the high school.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
go ahead and then Bob.
I was just, I just noticed there's nothing on here about high school. Maybe that's for good reason. Maybe it right past me. I don't know. Is that because we're considering renovation, but the example you cited was a high school issue. Nothing, they're not one of the 33.
Okay, but just if you had any other questions, if you don't mind, just running through them and then we'll,
Okay, yeah,
see what
right,
they can
right,
share
right.
back.
No, I think that pretty, well, let me see. Oh, I'm just curious, what's the box truck used for? I don't think I've ever seen one.
It's gonna be used by our electrician.
Okay, yeah, and how many vehicles do we have? You cited 3 or 4 that needed to be upgraded, you know?
I think it's 11.
Excluding the buses.
I think, excluding the buses,
Well, you can, whatever, it's a separate category for buses.
I think I have 9 usable vehicles right now.
Okay. That's all.
Did you wanna, I think that one repair, that was an old repair you were
Yeah,
referring to.
the old, we were
Yeah.
talking about the high school and the chiller and all. That was an old repair that was done, and that was how we started on the PM for the chillers and towers. Looking at a program for that.
So there's nothing in the high school that.
No, anything with the high school will be addressed in the renovation.
That's what I think.
Voice calls, hello.
Good, thank you, Bob.
Did you want?
Mr. Curry, if I could, in relation to your first question about the timeline for the high school, we have stayed on every deadline that we had set for ourselves.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Here's the thing that on the next slide, if you wouldn't mind advancing one. The part that could shift is when we actually start schematic design and everything that would unfold from there. And the only reason it would shift is simply because of making sure that we are ready to take on what we need to take on for this school in terms of the financing and what will be the size and scope of this project. I want to make sure that we don't start anything that we're not fully confident that we can finish. And so it is not because of Mr. Maloney and Ms. Mosley and I have worked diligently to make sure we have met every timeline so far, so we can set ourselves up for an important decision about the size and scope of the high school project. And we will continue to keep you updated on that in future meetings. But it's a good question.
We could take a short break.
Sure. 1 minute break.
Pretty changing things.
Dr. Grande, if it's okay with you, I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 21st Finance Committee meeting. At this time, I'd like to take roll call. Dr. Grande.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Henry. Mrs. Holbert. Here. As always, reflected are the district's mission, vision, and role of the Finance Committee, as well as our meeting protocols. Today is our agenda. After we have approval of the minutes, I'll give the September 16 minutes. I will give department updates. We'll discuss the contracts that are being submitted for board approval for the month of October. We will review the September 25 financials and bills list, and then we would have Ms. Jenna Arnson, our procurement coordinator, give a presentation about procurement. So first things first, just another update on our first fiscal year in task, the 24-25 annual employer fees. Approval. Oh, good job. The committee members had a chance to review the September 16 minutes. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I have a second? Second. Thank you. Keep it limp. Back to our fiscal year, in updates, the 24-25 annual PISA statements were completed. Just to give a little background about that, every year, school districts are responsible to verify the information that has been reported to PISA to ensure all of their employees are receiving the correct salary that was reported, as well as their correct years of service. That was completed. I do want to acknowledge the district's benefit coordinator, as well as our payroll clerk, for their assistance in completing that statement, but more importantly, for the maintenance work that they do every month to simplify this year in the process. Lastly, the two remaining fiscal year responsibilities are AFR, which is due November 30th. And again, in the child nutrition financial report is due December 31st. Again, both of those reports to the state have to match our audit. So again, the fact that we're in a good place with our audit being done. Our goal is actually to submit the CFNR by the end of October, and then again, the AFR will be submitted on time. Update pertaining to the 24-25 audit. We completed the on-site review on October 3rd. Like I said, all of the requirements have been submitted to the auditors. Again, we're just waiting for them to provide the draft. It is my goal that we get the draft in early November so we can actually present it at the November board meeting. And again, I do want to highlight something here where I reflected that annual progress. The district since July 1st of 23 has contracted with Tom Josiah as our auditing prep firm. Each fiscal year shows is the cost that the district has paid him to review our books as it relates to preparing for the audit. For the fiscal 23 audit, the district spent over $26,000. For the fiscal 24 audit, we spent a little bit more than $14,000. And for the fiscal 25 audit that we were in the process of doing, we've only paid $4,300. And again, that's just a reflection and a testament to the policies and procedures that were put in place, the reconciliation that's happening on a daily basis. Again, our financial situation, our financial reconciling is in a much better place. So again, I really just want to highlight that. I want to commend, of course, the business office staff for the work that they do every day. But I also want to acknowledge all of our staff, our budget managers, again, for their cooperation in compliance with all those policies and procedures that are being put in place. Next, focusing on budget planning for next year, on September 17th, the business office emailed a budget planning memo to all of our budget managers and outlined the purpose of each 4 of our budget phases, as well as the start and due date. So again, giving everyone a little bit more notice so they, in the course of doing their regular scheduled job, they can have time when it's appropriate for them. We also created like a budget manager guide for, and that was sent out on October 9th, and it just kind of gave guidance which directors should be focusing on, information they should be gathering, individuals they should be meeting, having meetings with prior to each budget phase. So again, just giving them a little bit more guidance on information to provide there. And then next, Dr. Johnson did want to give an update about the 26th one.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. During the last board meeting that we had, I spoke about how we know that the index for next year is set at 3.5%, and that's not confirmed. It's anticipated in September, and is now the confirmed rate. We have no assumptions for next year, nor will we expect any. So this was what we predicted. I mentioned in our last meeting that we have competing pressures on that tax bill increase. And of course, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that we would go all the way to 3.5%. But just understanding the posture that we're in as we think about our budget planning for next year, we are seeing challenges. And I just want to be very upfront about that with our board members, with the public, that we have the competing tensions of fixed costs that we know that we have to be able to to pay, such as the increases in the salaries that are built into the department agreements that were negotiated last year. That we know we need to pay our teachers well. We want to make sure that they are compensated for the work that they do. And so there's no concern about that. It's just more that it is an increase in costs that will be that's fixed, that we can already predict what that will be. We also have some additional necessities. For example, Mr. Mullen will be soon putting out a procurement for our custodial the cleaning services in our schools. And we anticipate that that could be $600,000 more than what we're paying at this time, simply because we believe that our schools need, better quality cleaning than what we're paying for now. And so it might require additional investment. Again, Mike, related to the discussion about we're deciding to go with things that fit into that category of necessities. They're not fixed. They are things that we would have a choice over, but they're pretty crucial. And then the third area is things that we would want to do to improve, obviously, the educational services that we're providing for students, and the curriculum that we might want to buy that it's not already built into this year's budget. If we need to do more additional dollars for that for next year, that would be a consideration. And then, of course, the final consideration is the capital plan. And there's no additional funding, there are new dollars to be able to fund the high school renovation project. And yet we know we need to do it. We know that, as Mr. Muller just said, we're not working on preventive maintenance in the high school, which really sets us up to say that to need to take on the renovation, because the longer we wait, we know it's our oldest building, we know that it really requires the upgrades that the renovation will provide. And when we put all of those factors together, we see that living within our budget is going to be a challenge. And it might be some difficult decisions, some harder conversations. I predict this year that in the past, and I just want to begin to just to predict and to put on the table that this is something that obviously we'll have more detail on. It's early planning for next year. It's just October. I do anticipate that in future meetings I know we will have more detail for the board, and I know for my cabinet, the administrators here, the faculty, the community. We will speak more about what we anticipate coming and how we plan for it. But I just wanted to make sure that I had a chance just to speak about this evening, to note our continued concern and these competing tensions on the budget for next year, and that we just will approach these very clear-eyed way, in a very transparent way, to really make sure that we continue to provide the high-quality educational services that our children deserve, and in a way that we can afford to do so. So thank you.
Next update is pertaining to policy 610, procurement updates. That policy was originally updated in May of 2025. We consolidated about 4 existing policies just to update, to create that procurement policy. It just went through, it will be presented for first read. It was discussed at the policy meeting earlier this month. And we just added some additional language that was presented specifically now that we have a procurement person, because by law, any contract over $100 is supposed to be subject to board approval. Again, contracts also are being reviewed by lawyers. So there was some instances where we're spending more on the contract to be reviewed than what we're actually approving. So now that we have a procurement position, we have that designated person for the district that's reviewing contracts. So we changed where the threshold is up to the state guidelines, where those contracts can be reviewed internally. Again, Jan and I work directly, closely together, where we're working directly with our solicitor to, if it does need to be reviewed. But again, especially since this process is newly implemented here, we added language for that, as well as some exclusions. So some of those exclusions will be like student activity obligations, because again, the district gets custodial of that account. So whatever they choose to spend their money on, they can choose to spend, as well as like field trips. Like, again, the field trips were already approved. So going through the whole process of just you having to buy the tickets to go to the field trip. So there was, and also things like out of district placement. Usually when a student is placed at that particular school, that is the only school that can accommodate them. So there's not a lot of wiggle room as it relates to changing language in the contract. So again, we don't want to have to spend unnecessary money reviewing things that doesn't necessarily have to be reviewed. So those are some of the updates that were made to policy 610 that will be submitted for first reading at this board meeting. Next, there's a memo that I sent out to all staff earlier this month. You can pull that up. And it was just given an update as it relates to the budget impasse that the Commonwealth is currently experiencing. What that memo outlined specifically was just giving staff an overview of what's going on in the Commonwealth. How this budget impacts is affecting school districts in the Commonwealth, the impacts it's having on Wallingford specifically. The district has not received some revenue that's due to us from last year and currently for this year. And if you scroll down a little bit, we also included in that memo, specifically on here's what the business office is prioritizing as it relates to expenses and what we're gonna be focused on paying, because we don't have an update as to when the state's gonna pass their budget and when those revenues will be dispersed to school districts. I have received information that even when a budget is passed, it still will take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for funds to actually make its way to districts. And then lastly, in the memo, we kind of just enlisted, here's what staff can do to help. So just be more mindful about discretionary spending. Again, as it relates to contracts, overtime is supposed to be pre-approved anyway, so make sure that we're doing the due diligence to ensure overtime is absolutely necessary. Again, working with colleagues and also operations to look at inventory levels. So if your building doesn't have it, maybe another building does, so we can kind of share resources. That's also something we'll talk about later in procurement as for joint purchasing. But again, here's just things that we can do. I do want to acknowledge the staff. So many staff members have reached out to me and said they didn't even know a budget impact was happening. But just, you already see like the due diligence of people being more mindful about, hey, so should I hold off on this? Should I not go to this professional development? So again, I do want to commend the staff for just the small efforts. And it might seem small, but again, I think this is also an opportunity for us to move forward to us having a more culturally responsible, fiscally responsible culture. You can close that, thanks. Next is our budget book update. I'm currently working with Ms. Riley, who's our communications supervisor, to complete the district and community data sections of that budget book. At our last cabinet meeting, we did discuss with our directors. The next step would be to work with them to finalize the department and building sections of the budget book. So again, we're trying to use this budget book as a one-stop shop for any information pertaining to the district. So strategic planning, capital planning, superintendent goes, department goes, like here's one location for anyone they want to view this information. Not only past district fiscal data, but also our first, we're gonna also be publicizing at the end of the fiscal 26-27 is our first budget draft for 27-28 as well. So again, and the goal is still to have our first budget book, which will reflect the 25-26 budget, available in March. That is going to be an internal document where it will just be reviewed by the board as well as our directors to make sure it's formatted. It looks exactly the way we want to. And then for the 26-27 budget, we will actually release a budget book to the public. And like I said, that book will also reflect our draft projection for 27-28. So again, we're trying to give a little bit of a heads up on where we're going. Next is our digital time clock update. We think the first test with identified staff. Originally, we talked about working with the building level. However, we then switched that to our central administration employees again, because they're right here. We get better access to them. We're doing our first test where it will not actually impact payroll. We're just testing input and output. They actually have training tomorrow and they're going to be starting, I think, within a week. Just having them clock in and out. We're going to give each employee different scenarios of someone clocking early, someone clocking late, someone forgets to clock in altogether. So we can just kind of see, making sure all the information that's coming over to the system. So like I said, it's not going to impact payroll, but we're just testing that input and output. And then lastly, Dr. Johnson, I do try to bring him some good news. It's not often that I have some, but we did find, I don't want to say found, but I'm listening at that some more money. The district applied for a FEMA grant in 2022 and that grant expired in 2020 and nothing was ever reported to the state. I originally started working on this with Dr. Marseille. When we identified some expenditures, I have to give him his credit for a lot of work he did there, and then finalized that with Dr. Scanlon during his interim tenure here. The documents, as you can imagine, changed like 6 different times because of just the time frame of it. However, we did got all the documents completed at the end of May, which they informed us that the district would actually receive about $131,000. We actually got the money on October 7th. So that's some good news there. Next, we have a total of 7 contracts that are being submitted for board approval, 6 contracts with an actual cost. The total cost of all of the contracts being presented this month is $3,985,169. The bulk of that, of course, is for BDA, which is the company that provides like the PSAs and the BCBAs as it pertains to related services. I will say the business office is working very closely with student services to monitor the increased cost here. We know that is something that a lot of our community have, members have talked about the amount that we're paying them on a monthly basis. So, even with Janet here, we've already had some conversations and we are monitoring that and putting some things in place to try to take, better action and paying attention to with that. But again, that 3.8 is budgeted and that was based off of the 3.5, a little more than 3.5 million we paid in total, in totality last year. And again, we had additional students that required those services as it relates to what's identified in your IEPs. Again, I just wanted to bring another attention to the Verizon wireless contract. This is the contract that's actually not costing the district anything, it's actually saving us some money. Want to acknowledge Mrs. Troni, our IT director, for his work on this. Basically, with this agreement, we're switching from the state procurement contract to the federal procurement contract, the national procurement contract for our Verizon wireless, which are the district cell phones. And by doing that, the district's actually going to save about $5,500 annually. So again, here's just another example of us doing that due diligence of procurement and the benefit to the district. And then the other contract, I just want to, that's being submitted for board approval. I just want to mention what Mr. Maloney said, the purchase of the 2024 van. Again, this was budgeted money. We purchased it on 9/30 because we got an additional $1,000 savings if we did that. There we go. Which is why, again, this is being ratified because the district already made the purchase. But again, it was one of those situations where it was more beneficial to the district to do it that way. So again, like I said, Jen, I'll actually go in more detail about all of that when it pertains to procurement. But like I said, we have 7 contracts being submitted for approval, 6 with the cost, and it's a little less than $4 million for the total cost of those contracts. And then to go over the financials, like I said, as provided in the back there, we have copies of our actuals for the revenues and expenditures. This information also has been posted on the website since Friday. Just to go over it, our funds 32, 39, and 71 were all earned interest. Funds 51, which are food service, consisted of online lunch account payments, state and federal subsidies, and earned interest. Fund 81, which is our student activity, consisted of earned interest and deposits into the middle school yearbook, the high school speech and debate club, Silvertone, and the high school yearbook. And then again, Fund 10, which is also reflected on our actuals you just see here. To date, the district has collected a little less than 88% of our local revenue. Again, just thinking about what that budget impacts, this is the benefit of being a district that collects most of its revenue from local revenue sources, because again, while a lot of districts have been struggling to, and like we listed in the memo of what other districts have been doing as far as layoffs, canceling after school activities, canceling homecoming, doing everything they can to try to minimize their expenditures. Like I said, as a district, mostly funded by taxes, we have been able to conduct business as usual. But again, we collected about 88% of our local revenue. State revenue, what we have received, again, as you see, our state and federal are very low. But the reason we do have some state revenue is the property tax relief that districts get, that is already predetermined. So that's not dependent on the state's budget, which is why we received that first payment in August. We're actually receiving our second payment of about $1.5 million on Thursday. And then the other 300,000 that you see there, if you recall, when the state had to make changes to the way the formula and how it calculates state subsidy. Remember, they gave out money for adequacy or tax supplement. We were a district that received extra money because of the tax supplement. We received that $68,000 last year. The way that it was mandated that we reported it as unearned revenue last year, and then we had to report it as revenue this year. So that's completely what that $1.9 million is. And then again, like I said, we haven't received any federal dollars to date. You can go on. Yep. And then you can go to the slides, actually.
Those songs.
Yes. All right, and then again, here are our September expenditures. Of course, all of the bills lists are attached with each one of those listed with each one of the funds where we had disbursements. You can actually just open the treasurer's report. And again, just reflected here are the earned revenues for the month of September. You can see most of that revenue was collected as local revenue sources, which were local taxes. Again, we are approaching the end of the flat period, so at the end of the, I believe this month is when the penalty actually kicks in. And the second bulk of our revenue were actually received our receipts from LEAs. Again, if you recall, through the BCIU program, we do have school districts that send students here for certain related services, and because they utilize our building, the district actually collects on average a little more than $500,000 a year for that. So that was the second bulk of our, and if you scroll down a little bit more, just showing our payroll expenditures, a little bit more. Right there. As you can see here, you recall our payroll expenditures are journaled into the system, so they're not reflected on the bills list, which is why we list the treasurer's report to show. So everything from net payroll down onto P are included into what we paid out for payroll. And now I am going to officially introduce Ms. Jenna Arneson, who is the district procurement coordinator, and she is going to give an overview of what procurement is, also talk about the difference of the different types of procurement, the process, the implementation that we're focusing on, and what our first year goals are.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Today, we're going to walk through what procurement really means in a public school setting, how it ensures accountability, compliance, and equity, and how we can build a transparent and efficient process that works for everyone in our district. On tonight's agenda, I'll cover overview and objectives of procurement, the benefits, different types, guidelines, define the lowest responsible bidder, review the process, describe our implementation, and share first-year goals. Procurement may sound like a technical word, but at its core, it's about fairness, accountability, and value. It ensures that every dollar we spend is used wisely, every vendor has a fair opportunity to compete, and every decision reflects our district's mission to provide the best education possible for all students. Procurement ensures organizations obtain what they need on time, at the right price, and from responsible suppliers while following internal policies and any applicable laws or regulations. Our key objectives in the overall procurement process are to promote transparency and build public trust, to comply with state, federal, and district policies, and document each step, which helps prevent corruption, fraud, and legal issues. Risk management is a big piece of procurement. Public schools are accountable for the careful use of public resources, and this process can help mitigate that risk. Procurement supports environmental stewardship and promotes socially equitable access and fairness in contracting. We're using taxpayer funds, so we need to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible to maximize the value of that money. And those objectives reflected are the benefits of procurement. So I'm going to highlight a few of those. First, cost savings. Strategic sourcing helps secure the best value for money through competitive bidding, negotiations, and bulk purchasing. Looking at transparency and accountability, this procurement methodology provides a clear audit trail of how public and organizational funds are spent. This increases trust among stakeholders, board members like yourselves, funders, and the public. And with the procurement process comes better budget control. Being able to track spending against approved budgets prevents unauthorized purchases and enables forecasting and financial planning based on real procurement data. So one of the most valuable benefits of this process will be our ability to exercise data-driven decision-making. Through procurement analytics, we'll be able to measure vendor performance, cost trends, and category spend. So there are different types of procurement depending on what you're trying to achieve. So to determine the right method, we're going to consider the nature of the project. Quotations are always a good place to start when buying anything because it ensures that the supplier and vendor are on the same page. A quotation is a formal statement provided by a vendor or supplier that outlines the price, terms, and conditions. So if the district would like to purchase new art supplies for the schools, and the cost of the new art supplies is $5,000, they would ask for a quote to ensure that they stay within their budget. Competitive sealed proposals begin with a request for proposal or RFP. So when the project involves complex services or products and you want vendors to propose creative and specialized technical solutions, and the outcome is not fully known, you're going to want to use competitive sealed proposals. Factors like the vendor's experience, their qualifications, and the quality of the service are going to be more important than receiving the lowest bid. And there's a need to negotiate with vendors here on project details, price, or scope. And the goal is to secure the lowest responsive, responsible bidder, which I'll go into more detail in a few minutes. Examples of this would include IT system development, architectural services, complex consulting, and specialized insurance services. Next, we'll discuss when to use competitive sealed bidding, which starts with an invitation for bids or IFB. And when purchasing standardized products or on a construction project where the requirements are clearly defined and precise, this is where you want to use competitive sealed bidding. The process needs to be as transparent and straightforward as possible with no discussions or negotiations. And while price is the primary factor, the contract is awarded for the lowest possible price among qualified bidders. So examples would be acquiring a large-scale IT project or installing HVAC, plumbing, or electrical systems or playground equipment. Continuing, we have cooperative purchasing, which is also referred to as cooperative procurement. And that's a method that allows multiple public entities like public schools to combine their purchasing power to acquire goods, services, or construction more efficiently. In the cooperative purchasing space, we're talking about joint purchasing, which allows two or more public agencies to share their expertise and resources. The district can spend less time on individual bidding processes or gain access to pre-negotiated contracts with vetted vendors. Or there's piggybacking, which allows one agency to ride on the contract of the other agency. And this is assuming the original agency explicitly permits others to use the original contract, that they follow the proper competitive bidding procedures, and that the vendor agrees to extend the same pricing terms to the piggybacking agency. So examples of co-ops who provide advantages like these would be Co-Stars, PEPM, KPN, and the CCIU, for example. So our district gets copy paper through joint purchasing with the CCIU, and there's many other things that we take advantage of with cooperative purchasing right now. Sole source procurement is permitted when only one source exists for the item or service. So when emergency situations require immediate action and competitive bidding would cause harmful delays, or if competition is inadequate, even after soliciting multiple sources, that would be a time to use sole source procurement. An example would be if an elevator needed to be repaired and the key to access that elevator was only owned by the supplier, then they could be the only one repairing that elevator. Or we have emergency procurement, which is permitted when there's danger to public health, safety, or welfare, and immediate procurement is necessary. So when the situation cannot wait for normal bidding processes, or when the emergency isn't caused by delay or inaction. So an example would be that if a tree fell in the parking lot and we needed that tree removed right away. So laws are intended to not only secure goods or services at the lowest possible price, but also to invite competition while guarding against favoritism, fraud, and corruption in the awarding of municipal contracts. Pennsylvania school districts must comply with whatever is more stringent of the state or federal laws. Thresholds are determined each year by section 807.1 of the Public School Code, establishing the legal requirements to follow in the purchase of materials, supplies, and equipment for use in public schools in the Commonwealth. So as of January 1st, 2025, state guidelines are as follows. Goods below $12,900 require no formal bidding. Between $12,901 and $23,800 require 3 quotes, but do not need a formal bid packet. quotes must come from at least 3 qualified and responsible vendors. And anything above $23,801 are considered over the bid threshold and require a competitive sealed bid. So there are exceptions to the bidding rules, including services, outsourcing, energy, textbooks, and classroom supplies. But while exceptions exist, the district should always do what they feel is fiscally responsible. So now on to some federal guidelines. As of October 1st, 2025, federally funded procurements of goods and services is now $15,000. So procurements valued at or below this may be awarded without soliciting price or rate quotations for grant-funded procurements. Purchases between $15,001 and $350,000 per year per uniform guidance requires grantees to conduct informal procedures consisting of solicitation of price or rate quotations. And simplified acquisition threshold, or SAT, is now above $350,000. So the formal competitive process would begin with a request for proposal or an invitation for bids, as previously mentioned. Let's talk about the lowest responsible bidder. At the discretion of the school district, the lowest bid is only chosen if the bidder is also deemed responsible for having the financial and technical capacity, and their bid is responsive, conforming to all bids, terms, and conditions. So some things to take into consideration with this are provided here. Does the company understand the scope of work? Have they worked with the school before? Did the company meet deadlines, budgets, and quality standards on past jobs? Does the company have enough qualified staff to complete the work in the designated time? In the end, the district makes the decision about who will be offered the award. And so here's just like a high-level look at the procurement process. First, we're going to identify the need. Is it a service, supply, or construction? And then we're going to be doing that with our appropriate director or budget manager. Second, we're going to plan and research how much is the spend, where are the funds coming from, and identify specifics like the number of students, the time frame, and the details. Next, what is determined during the identification is going to guide us through the appropriate procurement approach, which is step 3. And then moving on to step 4, evaluation and selection. Here, we're going to do a compliance check. We're going to pick the vendor or announce the award, circle back to the evaluation team, and then work together to decide how this is going to happen. And then after evaluation, the district would award through board approval. So then the purchase order is created because the vendor will then have official approval. And lastly, after all goods and services have been rendered as expected, the district will issue payment and of course, keep a record for audit purposes. So here we are. WSSD has begun implementing the procurement process. So let's take a closer look at what we've done, where we are now, and where we are going. Step 1, we have updated our policies and will continue to do so on an as-needed basis and as our procurement process reveals itself here. Step 2, the addition of my role as procurement coordinator has allowed the business office to centralize some processes. I'm reviewing and negotiating contracts and working with our solicitor and insurance broker to do so. And I'm also reviewing incoming requisitions to assure budgetary compliance and manage district credit cards. Step 3, by reviewing procedural manuals from neighboring school districts and in looking at WSSD's district procurement policies, we're now beginning to put together a procedures manual. And this will be unique to our district and be designed to be consistent with its respective management philosophy and organization. Knowledge, experience, and creativity are prerequisites here. And our goal is to be sharing a draft of this procedural manual at the November committee meeting. In step 4, we're going to continue planning. Upcoming will be scheduling training for budget managers to review the procedural manual. By visiting all schools within the district and understanding storage spaces and needs, we'll be better able to identify how we can make joint purchasing really work in this district. Last but not least, the long-term goal would be to develop an approved vendors list with no more than 5 vendors in each category for supplies, furniture, equipment. Currently, we have over 6,000 vendors in e-finance, so doing our due diligence is gonna take some time there. So we've identified the need, we've produced a plan for implementation, and now I'd like to share a few additional first-year goals. As stated before, we're gonna be developing and advertising an RFP for custodial services as the existing agreement expires in June of 2026. And we'll be working with budget managers to identify where procurement is most valuable to us in the district. So within the first year of this process, as I said, we're creating an easily digestible way of working for procurement for the district, and that doesn't, we don't want it to feel burdensome, but instead budget friendly, efficient, and effective.
That's all?
Questions from the committee?
I wasn't sure if I heard this. You said 6,000 vendors in e-finance. Is that 6,000 vendors that we have been in some contact with, or is that just, that's the total number?
That's the total number.
It's that anybody can deal with.
6,000 different vendors that this district has seen.
Okay, okay, all right, so I did. Okay. Then
You clear that down.
I did have a quick question just to walk a little bit through the lowest responsible bidder. Just want to understand that a little bit better. So it's just an example, totally made up to avoid any real ones. Like say we were hiring a company to take care of all the striping around all the fields, the grass fields. And, or let's say we had one and we wanted to bid that out now or something. And we found their work to like be, like sometimes the lines weren't aligned. Oh yeah, maybe a little bit,
Crooked lines.
crooked lines, we
It's not anyone.
kept, we kept, trying to get them to, do it right, but they weren't, and, so anyway, they bid on the project. They're the lowest ones. They have all of the other ducks in a row. Can we say no to somebody like that?
Yes, that's the part where the responsible part comes in. A lot of the times, I will say, as Jenna mentioned, it depends on what type of procurement you do. Because in some instances, yes, you have like with construction specifically, you have to go with the lowest price. But if we're doing proposals where again, we can negotiate prices, it's about the lowest responsible bidder. So you sometimes will have companies that offer the lowest price because they want the job, but if they can't meet the need, as we provided here, if we do records checks and companies say, hey, they don't have enough staff to do the job that you need, they're not meeting the need that we actually have. So just because they're the lowest price, it's not benefiting us. So that's where the responsible part comes in. And part of that evaluation process is you usually will have a committee. Prime example, what we just did for the construction management services, it was us three, one of our board members and also our high school principal. We all reviewed the proposals. We interviewed those firms, and as a committee, we made the selection based on who was the best fit for the district. So that's a prime example of that. It's always not about the lowest price, it's about who can meet the need. And that's where important that the district gets into the practice of doing this, because there are gonna be some things going through the procurement process, it may cost more money. As Dr. Johnson mentioned earlier, with our cleaning contract, we are preparing that the services that we want to a certain level, it's going to cost the district more money than what we're paying. However, our needs are being met well.
Yes.
Yeah, just if, so Ms. Mosley, one of the things I really like about you, and I've said before, is your approach to education for us and the public is another example of that. Thank you for that great presentation. It becomes quite apparent even through the presentation that this is a long time coming, so I'm glad this is happening. I also want to thank Dr. Johnston for taking a moment to spell out the pressures that are coming to us and being transparent about that. Just for the board, we already know that, but also more importantly for the public to understand that we've had a pretty good run. And now things are getting a little tighter, and we're gonna have to make tougher decisions, so appreciate that. And then, Ms. Mosley, you found the bright side, right, being completely tax dependent, local tax dependent. When, though, how much further into our budget year do we start feeling the pressure of not having state funding?
Again, financially, where the district is, we're fine. Again, that's why we did put out the notice as early as we did about what we're focusing on. And like I said, we've already seen, staff responding positively to that. Again, having a procurement person where we're monitoring spending. She goes through every single requisition entered, and hey, this is something that we should hold off. Maybe something to this capacity that you don't need to buy. So having that person dedicated to doing that is also helping the district. So again, we are fine, where we are right now, which is why we're putting those things in place now, to try to minimize. One of the things I also discussed with our AP, our accounts payable person, is the district does issue payments every week. I will start providing her a maximum amount per week that we can spend. And again, it's going to be in accordance with those bills that we have. Utilities, different things like that. I will start giving her that so we can just better manage our cash on the amount of money that should have.
All right, so the note I wrote was when we panic, it sounds like, we're not panicked.
You would, if I'm panicked, that's different. I'm not panicked, so we're okay.
Here's that.
Then I just briefly on that, the compounding effect of it. And so while we're able to weather for now, the state impacts, Ms. Mosley is to be well informed about what this means for the reimbursement we receive for school nutrition. And if that is uncertain at this time, we know that the payments are good through September, now into October. And Ms. Mosley, I don't know if you want to mention more.
Yes, I did mention, and we talked about this last year during the finance committee meeting when they were talking about discontinuing some federal dollars. So we ran through all of the federal dollars that the district received. From a food service standpoint, we receive about $500,000 to $600,000 in federal reimbursements. The notice that they did send out to all school districts that they can comfortably pay claims for July, August, and September. We just submitted our September claim. But then anything beyond that, they'll let us know. So again, when I'm thinking about planning, like I said, in the information and communication we're sending out, I'm factoring all of those things in. What that would mean for the district is our food service fund, which is self-sufficient based off reimbursements and daily lunch sales. The district doesn't have to add any money towards that account. If there is a discontinuation or a temporary discontinuation of payment, there's an opportunity where the district may have to float money to food service accounts and make sure it's self-sufficient or reduce the amount of services that are being provided for lunch. That's something that probably wouldn't do. So again, in communications, when I'm thinking about where we are financially, considering all of those things, worst case scenario, again, as we talked about in the memo, other school districts are borrowing money. We're not in that situation, but that's something that I've shared with Dr. Johnson, that these are the things that you guys know I live in Indiana. So those are things that I'm thinking about and properly make sure the district is budgeting for right now, if that does happen for us. So when we talk about the budget pressure, it is us assuming in some cases, worst case scenario that we have to plan for because we don't know what will happen.
I appreciate the prioritization of the list based on mission too. So appreciate it.
Just one quick question. The PDA contract, is that one that we might be in the future looking at this process?
Absolutely. Like I said, we are working with student services. I do want to acknowledge both Dr. Sandberg and Dr. McCullough. We have at least a weekly meeting with them to discuss, because again, our student services department actually has the largest department budget. And again, that's just the nature of the services that they provide. So we have been in constant communication with them, already identifying some of the services that they provide and going through this process with them. Again, timing is really important because again, in their case, there's a lot of things we have to provide. So it's not where we can do things mid-year, but we have already been working with student services to identify those larger service contracts that we're paying. Let's put this through the process and see what can happen. Yes.
Thank you. Public.
I only have two. You can wait till the end. One was that budget book. Did I hear you say that that's intended also for the public? There you go. Well, this is the answer after I have one second.
It's like a setup.
Sorry about that. The 6,000, in e-finance. I didn't hear the answer to that. Is that? We currently deal with 6,000 vendors, or that the e-finance system is holding 6,000 vendors and we don't use all 6,000.
Alright,
Now done.
okay, so one, because we wanna make sure the information is packaged in a clear and decisive way for our community. The budget book that we're gonna release this year is just for internal purposes, so it's gonna be our existing 25-26 budget that we'll review to make sure it's digestible, it's user friendly. The budget book we release going forward, which will be the 26-27 budget, that will be the budget book that's available to the public and going forward. So we're just utilizing this year as our test year. And then that the budget book will be released to the public. And as far as our e-finance system, we have over 6,000 vendors, which means the district has paid at some point 6,000 different vendors.
Yes.
And just to give you to be transparent, the process to add vendors here are really just, I would like to add this vendor, there's that information being you added. That is our process. Again, the purpose of procurement and having that approved vendors list, it's competitive to get on there. Which means if you know we're only working with 3 and 4 different companies for furniture, you're gonna make sure you're giving us the best possible price because you want to be that company on that list. And again, people want those type of contracts from school districts because it's continued business. So again, because we don't have that, in a lot of instances, the district just kind of takes, here's our price. We're not in the past, which, right, I'll give you guys an example. We had one instance where we had a contract with a vendor the district worked for before. We didn't have the contract in place for this year. And so I said to one of my colleagues, well, we need the contract and tell them we're paying the same amount that we paid last year. And they said to me, I don't think they're gonna go for that. I said, they don't really have a choice. So they came back to me and said, they gave me a contract and the price is exactly the same. I said, I know it is because they want the business. So again, the power, we have the power, we just really haven't utilized it in the past. So again, what we're doing is we're gonna make, instead of just giving people business, we're gonna make people compete and which will help us get better price and better service and quality.
Great, thank you.
That's it. So our next meeting is scheduled for November 18th. And this meeting is done.